Hey fam, so glad you found us. Come on in and grab a seat. My name is Dr. Chris, and this is my partner Jordan, and we are the faces of Melanin Culture from the Couch. All right, Jordan, tell them what we're talking about today.
We're going to dive into the conversations around how we receive compliments, how we kind of like respect each other in the culture versus, is it humor or is it insult, and kind of just dive into that a little bit, like how we interact culturally with some of those topics. We'll dive into more detail what that means.
Yes, so Jordan and I were talking kind of off camera about the whole ASAP Rocky situation, right? How he was found not guilty, and people were having things to say about what is it about in our culture when, for example, back when this whole situation happened with ASAP Rocky, from my knowledge, he was like, that was during his party era, right? Like that was during the time when his career was like really high and he was in his party phase. And now that he's kind of transitioned into fatherhood and like husbandship, even though they're not married, but like, right, they've kind of done like a pseudo husbandship relationship kind of thing. A lot of people have a lot of, at least it appears to me, negative things to say, right? Like, what is it about our culture that when a man, I feel like especially when he goes from being this person who's like wild and crazy and partying to now being a family person, what do we say about him? What are some things we say about him?
Look at this guy here. Who does he think he is? Or look at this good dad here. That type of thing. And like I was saying, well, before we got on here, I feel like sometimes it can be viewed as being somewhat of a compliment because like I think we use humor sometimes maybe as a defense mechanism sometimes to really talk about the real issue. Like that's something we probably always had to do. Maybe just probably just from the beginning of time of coming to this country. That's probably part of it. And I think sometimes then you have to kind of understand, okay, what is this person's intent, right? Is this person really, being genuine, or is this person, like I said, for lack of a better term, are they hating? Are they being a hater?
Yes. So what's the difference between in our culture when we're like, okay, good dad, I see you, good dad, right? Like, versus is that a compliment versus is that someone being like, is that seen as a negative thing? And how do we know the difference, right? Um, and I think, you and I, Jordan, were talking about it's about the relationship. So if you have a relationship with someone and you're like, you know, you're using humor to joke about something, like, oh, I remember back in the day when um, I was in high school, like my boyfriend was on the football team, and so his football friends would be like, "Ah, Will, you so whooped, you so whipped, that girl got you whipped," right? And depending on who was saying it was depending on what it
Right,
meant,
right.
because if his friends, right, then they were really saying it as a joke, but and it was like, "Oh, look at you, so whipped." But if a stranger was saying it, it was more like almost with envy of like, how come you're doing those things for her, or how come you're doing those things? Period. Like, right? Like that you got. I don't know. I agree with you, Jordan. I think it's all about the relationship, right? Um, and it depends on who's saying it that allows for it to be a compliment versus an insult.
I just thought about something funny too. It's kind of like how like in our culture, like one phrase could mean a lot of different things, right? So it's like you say somebody tell some, hey, what's up? What's up? Nah, what's up? It's like you can say one thing and it can have three different meanings. It depends. Like, you can say one thing, right? And it just has three different meanings. So it's like it just depends on maybe the person or how they said it, the tone, that type of thing.
The way that we perceive certain things, I guess we can only speak from our perspective, which is what we're in. But I can't but wonder sometimes if in other cultures people also perceive. I feel like sometimes, things that we should see as positive. So, for example, when you see someone being a good dad, right? What, for example, again, going back to ASAP Rocky, you see him, like loving on his kids, and he's the one who's like kind of always with them. He's been very vocal about wanting to be the dad, a hands-on dad. Like he refused to hire a nanny because he's like, I don't want anyone raising my kids. Like I want that to be me. And you know, you hear so many men on social media bashing him and saying certain things about him. And what is that about? I feel like I wonder, like, is that a thing of our Black culture sometimes that we see these examples of men trying to do good by their kids or the right things? Why is it that some people feel so threatened by that, right? Like, what is that? What, because would we see in white culture where you would see a white man saying, oh, look at this man taking care of his kids, who does that? Like, I feel like you don't necessarily see that. So how come that's something that we see in our culture?
I think sometimes it's like a level of like insecurity. I know I saw somebody kind of like make a point the other day where it was like people like to see your rise to the top, but when you keep winning, it's a problem. I thought that was kind of interesting too. It's like, you know, people see you, you beat this case. Oh, you got Rihanna, who's like this covetous superstar. You got you have kids with her. It's like there's some envy there probably sometimes, right? And sometimes people don't know how to distinguish that, and you know, it becomes this insecurity. Okay, now I got to express this, or now with these platforms, I can say something. I can make a little comment about it. And you see that, and I think it's also kind of like how I'm really into sports, right? So like sometimes you'll see where I have respect for all types of players, especially like let's say basketball, right? Now there's some basketball players where I may not like their style of play or I'm not really a big fan of it, but I'm not gonna sit here and be like, man, who does he think he is? Getting he's not that good. He could beat me, like he could beat most people on this planet. So like I'm not gonna be that guy, right? Because I respect the game too much. But what you'll see is that people who have nothing better to do with their time, or they just want to find something negative to point out and just say I dislike that, or just like this person. You see, especially like somebody like LeBron James who's been playing for 20 plus years, and like I said, I don't know his personal life like that, but for the most part, he hasn't really been in like any scandals or things like that. People are like, oh, I don't like LeBron. What do you mean you don't like LeBron James? Like, what do you know them? Like, you don't know him?
What
Why
has
is
he
he
done
playing
to you?
like this or whatever? It's just like, for what? Like, where is this coming from, right? But it's just like sometimes in people's nature to hate or have like this negative context with things sometimes.
But again, Jordan, I wonder, is that something that, okay, because for example, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I've never witnessed, for example, a Mexican ever say anything bad about a Mexican, right? Like, I've never seen that. Seen on social media, like someone from the Mexican culture go online and like trash another Mexican. How come within our culture that's something that we feel so comfortable doing, right? Like, and it happens all the time,
Yeah.
right? Even when it comes to like black men and black women, like that's a huge thing constantly
Mm-hmm.
online. It's like black men bashing black women bashing black men. Again, I've I and if I'm wrong and if someone else has seen it, please bring it to our attention. Write it in the comments, send us a video. But I've never even seen like where a white man has trashed white women, right? Or Hispanic. Again, like what is it about our culture that we feel so comfortable? And I know people can say, "Oh well, if we look at slavery and if we look at the history of the way that the black man and the black woman was put together, we can see why that happened." And I can say, okay, that's a point. But here's the thing. At what point do we stop allowing that to be our
It's tough because I think it starts probably just within like the household, the culture you kind of establish at home, how you're kind of raising somebody in their beliefs, right? And I think sometimes what you see too is sometimes the negative stuff gets highlighted more. Does that make sense? Like that's gonna get the most attention because people don't realize it, but like people feed off negativity, right? People feed off the drama. That's why you see what happens in the news, where reality TV is now. There's not really going to be a lot of positive, lovey-dovey things going on unless you're watching maybe a rom-com, right? Like you're going to get the fighting, you're going to get the cheating scandals, you're going to get all of this drama that's going to be fed. That's going to people are going to feed off of. So I think that's part of it. The other side too, I think that sometimes when you look at how some of our families are constructed versus others, um, culturally, do you see where like okay, there's a level of respect for each other, right? There's a level of respect for like the black man and the black female. Like we both serve the same space, versus like we're at odds with each other, or are we really working together?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think that there are situations where you can see the dynamics between black men and black women and the respect and the love. I'm trying to think. Was it I think there was an interview with Cat Williams where he was talking to someone and he was just talking about like the level of respect that he has for black women, and there's several I mean, even like DL Hughley, he's talked tremendously about this, right? Like that he would never say anything to put down the black woman because that's he doesn't believe in that. So I do think that there are lots of examples of where there are situations that we can see like, oh look, there is love and respect for the union between the black man and the black woman. But I think because there's so much of it that isn't that, and even as I'm saying that, it goes back in my mind to thinking of like, I think that's why it's so easy sometimes for the black community to be manipulated. I'm just going to say that because everybody on the outside, and I mean everyone who's not part of the black community, knows how divided we are, and they use it to continue to divide, right? And because we don't have that, we're not as strong as we need to be within our together. It's easy for us to be manipulated, which is crazy, right? Like, I mean, again, it makes sense because if we think about the intentional parts of slavery and the way in which if you divide, you can conquer. So we had to be literally divided, right? Like, even, and I think we've talked about this previously, even with things like being able to collect checks from the government, right? The man couldn't be in the house, right? So he was literally taken out of the house. So there was systems in place that created a divide between the black man and the black woman. But then I guess my next question is how do we men begin to mend that? I think there are some things that are happening that journey has already started, but how do we individually in our own home begin to mend that?
I think it starts with trust, and also understanding. We're kind of going off on a tangent now, but like just being real, um, making good solid choices. Right. Here's what I mean. I know that's a broad statement, right? But
Okay, I was about to say
let
tell
me let me
me.
elaborate on that. So I think a lot of times, what we see sometimes is even like looking at a family, right? We are watering down how important who you choose to procreate with looks like. Like we make it almost like a casual thing. Like, oh, I'm not just talking about casual sex. I'm talking about like having children, right? We make it look like, oh, that's my baby mama or that's my baby daddy or like, we kind of do this thing, right? But the aftermath of all that for years to come has a great impact that we don't even realize, right? And it comes from even like being at odds as maybe two co-parents. Um, one person having these values and morals, the other person not having something totally different. Now this child is being raised in two different planets, right? Two different households for two different things, and now this person becomes an individual. And what are they? What are you bringing into the world, right? So I think that is a big part of like there's like this the family cycle. Like I think it goes back to that, like and then like when you don't have that structure, that unified front, you see these results. Not saying every single time it's like that, but when a lot of times you can just tell right away. Okay, like this was a broken system. This was a broken cycle. This was a broken, you know, family system with these particular values weren't there, right? And so these people come to the world and come of age, they're confused. They don't know what to do. They don't know what direction they are, and they have to kind of make up their own value system or whatever the case that may look like.
But I think, even as you say that, there has been in the past few years, there's been a shift. And I think this is why lots of women, and not just Black women, but women in general, are deciding not to date because the bar is becoming higher. Like, we're not just having baby fathers, we're looking for husband, and we don't want a 50-50 man. We're looking for a provider and a partner and a lover. Right now we're not just looking for someone we can split the bills with. For that I could do that, right? And so I think there has been this shift. Now the part that, and Jordon, this might be controversial and we might have to talk about this on another day, another video, but I think the part that is lagging behind is that instead of men saying, how can we rise to the occasion and meet women where they're at with their new bar being high, what I've seen, at least in social media, is men being like, that's why you guys are going to die alone. That's why nobody don't want you. That's why, I'm going to be a passport bro. Like, instead of saying, let me look at myself
Mm-hmm.
and let me see how I can show up better. And so that when I show up, I'm showing up healed or in the midst of
Mm-hmm.
healing, right? As opposed to, again, let's be honest, if we look at, again, and this might seem like it's a tangent, but I always say, Jordon, everything is connected. If we look at the trajectory of, like, Black women are the most educated women in the world, right? The most, not even most educated people. Black women hold more degrees than everybody else, right? And so Black women are also in this particular moment in time. I don't want to misspeak, but if I was reading the statistics the other day, Black women currently in this country are the one of the fastest growing populations of homeowners, but like solely just them owning homes by themselves without a partner, right? So past where a man could say, "Oh, you need me," and the woman would just settle because she needed a roof over her head and food and clothes and whatever. Women now are saying, "I don't need that. So if you're coming, you need to come with other stuff. I don't need you as a provider because I can provide for myself. What else are you bringing?" And men are like, "What you mean?" Right? So all of these different things I think are shifting. And I think the and again, I might be biased here, but I'm wondering, like, will the Black man rise to the occasion? Will they heal? Will they begin to look at themselves and instead of blaming the Black woman, instead say, okay, well, what do we need to do individually, but also collectively?
No, I agree. I think there's definitely a lot of room for growth. A lot of hey, like things are different. You gotta step up to the plate. Like nothing's gonna be given to you. And I think also from like the black male perspective, it's like where's the sense of urgency, right? 'Cause I know sometimes there's this, and I'm not gonna try and generalize this. I don't know anybody take offense, but just like sometimes you'll see where like there's like just this very chill sometimes or laid back, and I think sometimes what I notice with I guess some black women it's like a little bit more of like a sense of urgency. Like let's get this done. I gotta do this. I need this, and the time is of the essence. Where sometimes for the male perspective, it's more like I got time. I can take my time, and not saying that's not the case, but when we're talking about like the bigger picture, there's a lot of things where you need to have more of a sense of urgency, like especially when you're talking about maybe lifelong goals and establishing yourself and where you want to be, and figuring this thing out versus just like sitting around and waiting for something to kind of happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with you. And I think there's so many facets to this conversation, Jordon, that we can continue because I definitely think that there's more to talk about with this. And I'm really excited to see. For those of you watching, listening, please like, subscribe, share, comment. If anything that we said resonates with you, please comment. If anything we said maybe you don't agree with, please comment. Let us know how you feel. Let us know what you're thinking. And we'd love to come back and revisit this conversation later on, especially with the more comments we have. We'll definitely do that. So again, thank you guys so much for listening and watching, and we will see you guys on the other side. Peace, love, and melanin.